these Zionists have nothing to do with our heritage in pre-Abrahamic or post-Abrahamic. And to throw one of our own historical moments and archaeological history and cultural history as if it is the Zionists that we want to burn. I think it re-emphasizes actually in the mind of the other that we are evil. I sometimes feel when we are trying to resist the imperialists and we're trying to find symbolism to do it, we oftentimes fall into creating more hate for ourselves.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like we're just demonized regardless of what we do. And the funny thing is that when they do find Canaanite sites, they will automatically label it as a Jewish site. But when in reality, you couldn't really distinguish what was a Jewish site versus a pagan site, because these were all Canaanite city-states and tribes that shared the same culture at the time of the Bronze or the Iron Age. So there is also a lot of rewriting that's going on. So things that are, let's say, Canaanite and pagan, these are the ancestors of the Palestinians and Syrians or Lebanese, are now being rebranded to be the ancestors of Israelis.
Hey everybody, this is Laith Marouf from Free Palestine TV, and we are in Al-Hari or Shikka or Batron. It's in the north part of Lebanon, close to Tripoli. And behind me is Nabu Museum. We're here to discuss an exhibition here and the amazing work of the museum. But before we continue with this report, I ask you to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate so we can continue bringing you this content. We have with us a special guest, Karl.
Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you too. Karl is one of the people that work on the exhibitions here. There's a lot to talk about the history of Nabu.
Yes.
Why Nabu? When did it start? Why the name even?
So it started around 2018 with the purpose of discussing stories of this region that are otherwise untold. It takes on a rather anti-imperialist stance and promotes unity among the different groups who call this region home. The reason why it's called Nabu is, although it's a Mesopotamian god, and that's actually one of the questions why the question that most people have, why a Mesopotamian god? It's a god of literacy, of wisdom, and of writing. And to a certain extent, Mesopotamian gods were also venerated and worshipped on this coast. So syncretism, or the merging of cultures and traditions, it was never an alien thing. And it's still a practicing method to this day.
Well, it clearly, there's a lot of attempt by the imperialists to force our peoples in the region to kind of hate each other or look at themselves as not a part of a wider, more complete community. And Nabu and bringing in a Mesopotamian god name doesn't negate that we're all Canaanites. In fact, widens our identity.
Oh, for sure. I mean, stories like Baal and Adonis. I mean, Adonis derived from Tammuz, and Tammuz was also a Mesopotamian god. And then Adon became Adonis. Ishtar became Astarte. Astarte became Venus. So this entire world, this ancient world, the way we know it, there was no such thing as East and West. It was the East Mediterranean. It was from Mesopotamia to Greece. It's always been a place of cultures and intermingling, and to a certain extent it was kind of the same, but with just different local flavors.
There is an exhibition we're going to go look at about the Lebanese civil war, as they call it. I think this is a very important symbol of that period. Can you explain to the viewers what is this bus doing here? So
this bus, also known as the Remmaneh bus, was one of the pivotal moments in our history. It is what most people think what sparked the war. Now you can talk to whoever group or whoever scholar, they always give you their idea of which day started and who started what, but this to some and to many is the thing that sparked the civil war. And it's part of the museum's collection, and we often talk about this piece whenever there is the anniversary of the Civil War, unfortunately. But it's important to remember such moments in our history so that they may never happen again.
So tell people what happened with the Ain al-Remmaneh bus. Why did it trigger, as some people think, the Civil War?
But you have two sides with the Ain al-Remmaneh, and the museum also takes a stance where both sides should be talked about. This was a bus that was driven by Palestinians. You'll have some people say it was armed militants, and others say it was innocent civilians. And when the Kataeb militia ambushed the bus, that's what sparked the Civil War. But good luck getting a narrative that people agree on. Mm-hmm. So the Ain al-Remmaneh, just like everything that's happened before it and now, is a topic that gets swept under the rug, never really discussed, and that's why we don't really have any permanent exhibitions or museums dedicated to the Civil War in Lebanon, because everyone has their own different story. And but it's something that we should try to talk about more often, because the longer we sweep these stories under the rug, it's only going to fester into something that's uglier, and then we repeat history again.
Okay, so let's go inside now the museum, and we'll carry on with the discussion as we look at the exhibitions. Karl, this is a train cart.
Yes.
And this train track
would take you, if you wanted to Naura and then to Palestine.
And this goes all the way to Syria.
To Syria as well. That's the coastal train
the part
tracks.
Of the Hijaz line.
Yes.
So why is it still here right now?
Well, what makes this particular railway interesting is that, like most places around the coast, they're paved over. But what the museum did was they've restored it and made it part of it's integral to the landscape of the museum, kind of to show people that, again, just like how we're trying to tell all these stories that were lost in time, our connection to the rest of our lands are also lost in time.
You know, the Israelis destroyed, obviously, the connecting parts to Palestine in 1948. The British also, before them, destroyed the line that used to go from Damascus to Haifa to stop the Arab revolt. And you know, they have been trying to kind of fragment us as a people, and Nabu is trying to do the opposite.
It's trying to highlight these stories, and it's trying to show that this was always part of our landscape. And always will be.
So when did Nabu open?
In 2018.
2018. And I gather that it's the only free museum in Lebanon.
There are a couple. There are a couple, free museums as well. But with Nabu, their main philosophy is that they will always keep it free to visitors, and they wanted to fill in a gap because the north lacks museums, you know, and the north is one of the richest regions in the country, and they were trying to fill in a gap.
Look at this beautiful. I mean, the architecture is amazing.
Yes, it's designed also with the calligraphic designs by Diazawi, and he's an Iraqi contemporary artist as well. So there's a lot of collaboration with artists from around the region.
And the view?
Towards the Mediterranean Sea.
Wow. Before we take a look at this exhibition that you have about the Civil War, quote unquote.
Yes.
Explain to us this exhibition here.
So the purpose of this exhibition is it's mostly clothing from around the region, Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon. But we tend to focus on clothing as some sort of recent folkloric tradition, or we talk about its technicality, when in reality, a lot of the symbols that you see in our traditional clothing are tied back to the Canaanites and the Mesopotamians as well. So while the women who were weaving those clothes were maybe not aware of its symbols, they were certainly passed down, and the more you try to deconstruct their meaning, the more it relates to the Baal cycle, which is a theory that is proposed by Heike Weber. And an interesting story about Heike Weber is she's a German researcher, and she embroids as well, and she learned how to do all of this thanks to her mother-in-law, who's a Nakba survivor. and she wrote a book called Anat and her hero Baal, and decodes every Palestinian and Syrian motif that you see on the clothing.
Show us some of these motifs.
Most of the motifs are actually on the first floor. This is more of like a crash course of the mythology, the Canaanite and Mesopotamian deities. Well, for example, this one in particular, where we could talk about this is an Aleppan silk robe. The Lebanese used to do the same as well. And what makes this one particularly interesting, I spoke to a scholar and an archaeology student, these flowers that you see are shaqaq al-Na'man, the flowers of Adonis, which symbolizes rebirth and death, which is an integral idea, an archetype in our region. We are a culture that always looks forward to the next season. Our weather is rather moody, and we kind of explain these changes by the battle of the gods and its hopeful rebirth.
Shaqaq al-Na'man in English are wild poppy seeds.
So yeah, shaqaq al-Na'man, which I mean my Arabic is bad, is the cuts of the beautiful one. And as we know, al-Na'man is the Arabic word for the anemone. I mean, and the anemone flower comes from al-Na'man. Al-Na'man meaning the beautiful one it's a trait of Adonis. He was a beautiful young god whose life was cut short due to a jealous god, and he was a lover of Adonis, the lover of Astarte or Aphrodite. And as soon as his blood began to drip on the soil, those flowers popped up instead. So anytime we see these little red flowers, we think of the blood of Adonis, and they're also very sensitive to the wind, very short-lived, like his life. So we have these practices. We might not know them by name day to day, but they certainly come from an archetype, a mythology, which is the region's, which is ours.
And I can see more like religious
figures as well.
Here.
So these are Syrian church banners around the 1800s, and the same type of motifs that you see, whether it's depicted on a saint or an early church father, are the same types of motifs that you see worn by, let's say, a Palestinian woman in Ramallah or in the Naqab Desert, for example. And the same patterns you can see are also found on Iron Age, Bronze Age, or early Islamic late Byzantine pottery as well. So there's a continuation there. And I think it's really interesting that we start reincorporating those symbols into our art and architecture to kind of lay claim that we're here to stay. You know, we're just following the footsteps of our forefathers and foremothers.
Of course, when you would have been able to go to the Temple of Baal in Palmyra before ISIS destroyed it, the ceiling of the Temple of Baal had all the symbols that we talk about currently right now, whether it's the cross, the crescent,
the sun,
the six-headed star, the whirlwind of the SSNP, the swastika, as we see it right there, which is a symbol of continuity and life.
Exactly.
So these symbols have always been with us and they carry the same meanings until now. Obviously, other cultures have adopted them,
of course,
in different ways, but they continue to live with us.
There's always this idea that when empires came to the Levant, they replaced its people, when in reality, we've been the same people for thousands of years. And I know the conversation of genetics is often a very uncomfortable one, but scientifically speaking, the population of this region has remained almost unchanged. So it's only normal that these traditions stick and evolve and retain some of its original symbols as well. So I think this is part of our indigenous culture, and it's survived throughout the ages. Even when we became Romans or Arabs or whatever allegiance we proclaim to be as a part of a wider culture, we still had those symbols.
This is a qubba, eh?
I believe it was for the dervishes as well. And what you see here are cypress trees, which is also a variant of the tree of life. And you see that same symbol in Mesopotamian reliefs. Now, of course, scholars would also insist that it was popularized further by the Ottomans, but then you can't also deny that the same symbols were used in Mesopotamia as well. Actually, one of the things you talked about Palmyra, which is really interesting, and it's something that it was a recent obsession of mine, are the stepped crenellations that you see on rooftops, whether you see it in the houses of Yemen or old Beirut, or even the Nabatean temples. You've noticed that you have these sort of stairs that kept repeating. So Heike Weber believes that this was a symbol for life and death, where Anat has to go to the underworld to retrieve Baal to ensure the rains occur. And she has to do that every couple seasons. So we had that on our architecture, we have it on our clothes. So all of these stories, like I said, goes back to these Canaanite mythologies.
And of course, Baal is the father god in the
Lord
Canaanite,
Master, Lord Master. This is the thing that is actually quite confusing, is like there's a lot of syncretism. So Baal can be, people still debate, is Baal the Haddad the same as Baal Harmoon? Or is it the same way we venerate the Virgin Mary when we say Our Lady of the Sea, Our Lady of the Mountain? We're talking about the same entity, the same the individual. So yeah, he became also synonymous with the name husband, Lord, Master. And El, which is argued to be the father, is the same etymology as Allah, Elohim, and the same words that even Jesus spoke in Aramaic. He also said, Ilaha, my God.
Mm-hmm. And of course, in Arabic right now, Baal still means something that's fertile or raw.
Exactly. Or, you still see a lot of the names of Baals preserved up in the mountains. Kfar Baal, Sabal. So the funny thing is now he's being demonized, if you've noticed in recent social media. He is now synonymous with Satan and the devil and associated with child sacrifices, when in reality, we don't have archaeological evidence, at least in Lebanon, about these child sacrifices. And if indeed he was sort of this demonic entity, then how come his word maintained throughout all these different religions that came to be in this region? So I think it might be another way to demonize the actual indigenous people of this land.
Yeah, it is. When I saw that,
it's appropriation and demonization.
You know, I was worried specifically about this because, you know, these Zionists have nothing to do with our heritage in pre-Abrahamic or post-Abrahamic, and to throw one of our own historical moments and you know, archaeological history and cultural history as if it is the Zionists that we want to burn. You know, I think it re-emphasizes actually in the mind of the other that we are evil. I sometimes I feel when we are trying to resist the imperialists and we're trying to find symbolism to do it, we oftentimes fall into creating more hate for ourselves.
Yes, exactly. It's almost like we're just demonized regardless of what we do. And the funny thing is that when they do find Canaanite sites, they will automatically label it as a Jewish site. But when in reality, you couldn't really distinguish what was a Jewish site versus a pagan site, because these were all Canaanite city-states and tribes that shared the same culture at the time in the Bronze or the Iron Age. So there is also a lot of rewriting that's going on. So things that are, let's say, Canaanite and pagan, these are the ancestors of the Palestinians and Syrians or Lebanese, are now being rebranded to be the ancestors of Israelis. So this entire exhibition is dedicated to the interpretation of Heike Weber, and she's decoded what each of the symbols mean on those dresses. So like I said earlier, you have the stairs, which are these crenellations you see on buildings. These symbolize, like I said, the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, where Anat had to save Baal in the underworld, and the god of death was called Mot. So we were speaking earlier about languages and how they try to separate, let's say, Arabic from Aramaic, when in reality, when you think about it, it's almost like local dialects. They use words that they would all understand.
I mean, when I watched Passion of the Christ,
yes,
99% of what they said I understood. And it was all filmed with the Aramaic peoples of Ma'lula, which nobody is asking now what happened to them.
No, none.
Or the churches of Ma'lula, the oldest churches in the world. But yeah, like, you know, in the way that my linguistic family that were specialized in this, they see all of these Semitic languages are not real languages, but as accents that were formulated in smaller movement areas until transportation with the wheel and the horse and so on grew the space where people can move, and then with them the homogenization of accents become, and that's how Arabic becomes the primary language. Once the political movement space with the Muslim empires started growing so large, and somebody could move from one place to another.
With ease.
So of kind of homogenization, according to movement of culture and trade. These are all on the stitching, right?
Yes, all on the stitching. And actually another symbol that I think would be of great interest to you is the earthworm or the snake motif, and I'll show it to you right there. Actually, it's on a dress, I think from Bilad Al-Sham. My pronunciation is horrific. You see those S shapes, kind of looks like the S shapes we all used to draw back in school. But in reality, that symbolizes a snake. It was clearly on a dress of a Palestinian woman, possibly a Palestinian Muslim woman, yet the same S-shaped symbol, you can find that at the National Museum of Beirut, worn by a 12th century Maronite mummy. The 12th century Maronite who's mummified now. So it goes to show you that regardless of our sects, we all upheld the same symbols. A Palestinian woman in the 20th century, a Maronite, it's shown on a Maronite mummy from the 12th century, and even the same patterns you can see on the frescoes, the same pattern on a loincloth worn by Jesus during the crucifixion, which is now in a Shia village in Rashida. So we all come from the same family. And I think what's important about this exhibition is to really truly realize that we have an important past that shouldn't just be preserved, it should be continued. We should reintroduce these symbols back, because they also serve as a good argument to lay claim that we're here to stay, this is our home, and these are our symbols. So, yeah.
Well, obviously, there has to be a revival of culture,
of course,
and art, even fashion. We are all getting homogenized globally right now, with us dressing up the same
100%, yes.
But I definitely hope and wish, as we start healing, as soon as Palestine is liberated, that we can start reviving our arts and our fashion and feeling comfortable exhibiting those outside a museum.
Completely. But I don't think it's too early or too late to start. I mean, if you look at the Renaissance of Italy, they were going through civil wars and they came out of a plague. I think we tend to be distracted because of globalization and this sort of dystopian black mirror we all have in our pockets. I think it's important for us to really try to go out of the way and to revive it, because it's those seeds that you plant that will be beneficial for the future once things do get better. It's never too late. It's never too late.
Well, Nabu definitely is doing a great work putting these things with all the information and historical record on it, and then letting people, start thinking themselves and coming to these conclusions that are 100% logical if you're not insane. Similarly, right now we're gonna go down to the exhibition that
the Civil War anniversary exhibition,
and I feel you're following the same kind of trajectory of things, of like, okay, we're going to put this out for you, we're going to have all information for you, and we're not going to force you to come to the conclusion.
It's true.
But if you follow just the information in front of you, you'll come up to the logical conclusion. Can we see one more thing here before, because this is very very beautiful. Tell us the story of this.
So this is made by Heike Weber's association, the Anat Center Workshop in Damascus. And like I mentioned earlier, her mother-in-law taught her how to create these textiles. Actually, right over there, we've placed a thobe from her mother-in-law with a thobe that she made herself as well. So kind of a mother-daughter dialogue. And she would create scenes of, for very folkloric Palestinian scenes, the return of, going back to your home, holding the key, so we've juxtaposed this with, the celebration of life, marriage, with death and potentially return.
Yeah, so this is a marcher that they're carrying.
She's holding
carrying that picture of the orange, and that's the family behind the...
Made by her workshop, using the same stitching techniques that women have been making for centuries, if not thousands of years.
Wow, this is a wedding.
A wedding, a celebration.
Yes.
And I think it was really important to really put those two side by side.
We celebrate life, and part of life is passing to the other side.
Contrary to the projection of the state that always says, the so-called state that always says that we are a culture of death.
Yeah, I mean, they threw all the ills of
on us. They've
modernity and imperialism on us, and projected them. Okay, so let's go
downstairs.
Look at that exhibition. So we came down. This is the basement.
This is the basement, the library level. There's a lot of old out-of-print books about the region, history, culture, politics, a lot of magazines. But this time we've decided to host the anniversary exhibition on that floor. The exhibition is called Never Again, Songs That Drew Lines. And the idea is for the average visitor to come to contemplate and to ask themselves the songs that are being sung in our name. Are we close to those ideas happening again, or are we far away? So it's purely meant to be reflective, but we've done things in a very subtle way where the experience itself feels heavy. You've got the concrete wash, the green line, the fake rusted metallic panels, the clankiness of the chains. We kind of wanted to abandon the sort of clean, white, contemporary gallery experience and just engage with the lyrics. The political parties aren't explicitly mentioned. Obviously the posters are, and we've taken snippets of the lyrics, translated them both into English and Arabic, and we've let the visitor to decide.
And obviously this is lyrics from whatever is going to play here.
Yes.
It says, Ya Sha'buna fi Lebanon.
You just hold, let me open that, let me turn that on. You can also control the volume on the knob, the dials.
Yes. So this is obviously from a Fatah song, Fatah party.
You can keep it playing on, it's okay, it adds to the ambience.
Oh, okay, it's okay. And this is a drawing from the famous Palestinian artist, what's his name, remind me?
It's a good
Abdurrahman.
Museum. Yeah, that's it. We wanted to prioritize period pieces, and what we've done was we've taken high-res JPEGs files and we've reprinted them.
To make them look like they're weathered.
Weathered, yes, and we've worked with a graphic designer and artist who unfortunately lost his home in Dahi. He's a graphic designer that works for the museum, and he helped us sort of age the poster, and it's kind of a fun exercise actually. But the idea is, at the end, is to create an uncomfortable experience. It's dark, it's poorly lit, and you're just engaging with the lyrics itself. And what we wanted to also do was some parts subvert expectations. So for example, when you enter the Massacre section, which we have political posters from Deir al-Amr, Sabra Shatila, a mention of Damour. A lot of people who interact with this particular panel are confused because there is absolutely nothing.
No lyrics, no song.
You hear it, you just hear pink noise essentially, and once our loved ones are dead, who sings in their names? And was all of this really worth it? All of this trauma, all of this hatred, this animosity, we were played. We were played. And for what? And for who?
This is why I personally get angry when it's called the Civil War. Because clearly it was a war meant to empower somebody outside the country. The Zionists and the imperialists.
Divide and conquer. Divide and conquer. And who's to say that the friends that they choose are going to be their friends forever? Have we not learned from the lessons that no one is a friend? And it's more dangerous to be a friend than an enemy? That's a sad thing. And what we wanted to do, at least to kind of lessen this contemporary view, is to actually bring authentic paintings painted by Dr. Faisal Sultan, who actually painted this in 1977, in the beginning of the Civil War. This is called The Embrace of Wounds, and I believe he mentioned that this is the Christian and the Muslim sect being torn apart. And he also drew the one at the far corner, the far end. This is the destruction of downtown Beirut. I believe the souks, which was also then further destroyed by corporatism and commercialism. And Dr. Faisal Sultan also did a media installation where he put every political party and just said, we're all martyrs. Usually with Civil War exhibitions or dark heritage, they tend to be very abstract because nobody wants to prioritize one party over the other. And sometimes that can fall into a sort of pretentious exhibition. But with this case, we have to talk about the political parties. We have to understand that we're all victims as well, because we were the ones who lost. All of us did.
I think a lot of people don't know outside the region that Lebanon doesn't actually teach history in schools.
No.
Because of how contentious those things are.
Exactly.
And, when I brought my kids here, I was shocked, because learning your own history is one of the kind of pillars of founding your identity.
Exactly.
And it's left for parents to teach the history, otherwise there'll be fights or something.
And 100%, I mean, even when you ask me about Remmaneh, and I'll be very honest with you, how do I even begin to discuss something like this that would upset anyone? And actually writing the panel in a very neutral stance that talks about what happened with different lens is already a challenging act. Because even whatever you do, you're always going to get harsh criticism. So, but we have to get past that. We have to talk about the things that makes us uncomfortable and realize we were the perpetrators, we were the victims, and we have to move past this and understand that the same forces today are trying to manipulate us to restart that particular history. But I feel like people are waking up to this now, left or right.
And clearly the genocide in Gaza and these war crimes that are being committed unabashedly in South Lebanon, this has awakened a lot of people.
Completely.
I think even when we look at the surveys of the Lebanese population, how they are right now overwhelmingly against the genocide in Gaza and so forth. So sometimes propaganda doesn't work when the truth is so bright in front of us, and the whole world is going through this. Look at what's happening in Western countries about that division of left and right.
They're meeting in the middle, or it's a certain idea that created something of a horseshoe theory, that somehow they're being accused of being either too far right and too far left. But with the horseshoe theory, when you move too far left or too far right, you actually meet in the center. And people are waking up like it is clearly unacceptable. And this whole time they've made dictatorships look like Sesame Street almost. And unfortunately, the era of social media was a heavy price to pay, that it had to be televised, that we had to be also traumatized by what we were saying. And I pray to God that this all ends and that Palestine will be free eventually.
Well, we see the Zionists and the imperialists attempting over the last few years to ignite some kind of civil strife, civil war in Lebanon, in order to weaken the resolve of the people resisting occupation and imperialism. Exhibitions like this, anyone that missed the education of history and that is living this moment, when they come to here, I feel they will feel more awakened and more asserted in their beliefs. Right now, as we were saying, most of the Lebanese, no matter what their sects, are coming together.
They're finally coming together.
Yes, and something like this helps them, as your work is, and this whole museum's work is, to find the commonality
100%.
between our people against the invaders or those who are trying to divide us.
And we have to find a way to educate them with the means of today's technology, right? And you're doing this through social media. With museums, we have to kind of ignore the sort of didactic, academic way. Sometimes you have to create something scenographic, something that puts you into the material texture of the war. And one of the items that I wanted to talk about was that mannequin head, for example, in the middle. That mannequin head, which was retrieved in 1977 by Dr. Faisal Sultan. So the artist who drew those scenes of destruction took that. So actually the only thing that, one of the few things that actually unites us all together is our mercantile and our love for business is completely also, it's also a victim of our own silliness, that we could actually end up creating something that's prosperous and unite us. We love to trade, we love to mingle, we love to sell, we love to buy. And that's also an element that could be, it's vulgar these days because of commercialism and consumerism, but at the time in Lebanon, there was a place where we all got together. And the place where we got together is now a mall rather than a souk. So this is a victim of it as well. And this is meant to shock. So when people approach from the stairs or from the elevator, they just look at this sort of decapitated mannequin and say, what's going on? And then they're forced to confront all these different ideas in front of them. So you have to educate people in a scenographic way, because sometimes it's the only way you could do it.
Well, art is very, very important in forming identity and resolving very hard questions.
Exactly.
So thank you so much,
No,
Karl,
my
for
pleasure.
this tour.
My pleasure.
Inshallah, Nabu gets the credit and that it should, worldwide, people that come and visit Lebanon should come to Nabu Museum.
They should.
It is always a pleasure to come here. The exhibitions change
The
constantly.
exhibition change. Actually, the exhibition on the traditional clothing of Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon will end of June. So if anyone's in town, the country, they should definitely visit.
Perfect. So this is Laith Marouf. You're still watching Free Palestine TV. I ask you one more time to press the subscribe button on whatever social media platform you're watching this on, and to go to our website, freepalestine.video, to donate so we can continue bringing you this content. Until we see you next time, we wish you a Bilad Al-Sham that is united and free from colonialism, imperialism, and Zionism.